If you want to go to England and face England, normally you would face them in a pretty tough environment. And this time you can just take them on with no distractions.
One thing's for sure, when they get back to India, he's never short of being selected there.
Oh, they've got him. Yes, he's out top behind. That's a beautiful goal from Ambrose.
Horrible man to face, but one of the loveliest guys off the park, and always laughing and smiling.
Welcome to Cricket Inside Out. This week we are debating whether coaches or captains should have a greater influence on a team. We're also turning our magnifying glasses towards the current crop of test bowlers and whose stats we expect to improve the most. Of course, as usual, we've got some great questions from you from Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, all over the place. Thank you so much for getting in touch. We'll get you some serious answers on those. Joining me on the show, Simon, Doull and Shaun Pollock. Simon, you guys in the land of the long white clouds seem to be back to normal.
I'll try and come back to my original picture, but I'm just going to do a COVID-free dance. How about that? COVID-free New Zealand.
Oh, look at you. So all things back to normal. People are back to schools. You even going to have full stadiums at live sport matches this weekend?
Yeah, live sport to a live rugby kicks off this weekend. What we call our New Zealand Super Conference competition is kicking off, and we're allowed as many people in the stadiums as possibly can be. Bars are open, clubs are open, and cafes you don't have to self distance, I suppose you'll call it, and everyone can just hang out in packs together. So yeah, it's been wonderful. I think the country did a great job, and we can now welcome people down to New Zealand if they want to isolate for 14 days, and then they can stay in a COVID-free environment.
Shaun Pollock in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, joining us on the show. It's good to have you back. How are you?
Yeah, we're not as fortunate as Dooley, feeling pretty jealous about the situation there at this stage. But yeah, so be it. No, all good. Looking forward to seeing some live sport on the weekend. So it should be quite entertaining.
And the West Indies have touched down in England. We have all systems go. Everyone passed their COVID-19 tests. There is a bit of a buzz in the air now that we start seeing resumption dates, and we have some international test cricket to look forward to in early July. What will the world of cricket look like post-COVID-19? I'm going to start with you, Shaun, on this, since you have been very intricately involved in a lot of these meetings behind the scenes in cricket. What is different?
Well, there have been lots of changes, haven't there? And stipulations and things put in place to make sure that, you know, they can try and play the game of cricket we love as sooner rather than later. I think, as Dooley mentioned, New Zealand, you know, you can get crowds in and maybe they won't have to follow the parameters. But for the rest of the world, they're still struggling with the COVID virus. It's just great to see the West Indies have touched down there. They've got a 3-week or 4-week period until they'll be participating. And the stipulations in place, umpires, as we mentioned on the last show, from the local boards will be able to stand. Obviously, you can't shine the ball with any saliva, which makes sense for those countries who are experiencing COVID. And, you know, there might be COVID replacements going forward for the next few months or even half a year or a year. So it's going to be different. It's going to be something we're going to have to get used to. But at the end of the day, I suppose the big positive is that we're going to see cricket back on our screens soon. And that's what we've all been crying for.
Yeah, Shaun mentions replacements. They took 25 players, including a massive 11 reserves on that plane over to England. That's a pretty big group to take across, Simon. But I guess since they're going to be in isolation, it's a bit like Big Brother. They're going to be living on site in a hotel. They're not going to be going out into the world much. And I assume it's best to just have the numbers there ready and on standby.
Well, no net bowlers. I think that's the key, isn't it? You can't just call up the locals and come and have net bowlers. So you have to take enough players so that you have part-time bowlers, not part-time bowlers, but spare bowlers, so that they can get through workloads in the nets. I'm guessing that's part of the reason. It sounds more like a rugby touring squad than it does a cricket squad nowadays. But you have to make sure you've got all bases covered, all resources covered. I think if there are any injuries, any outbreaks, which you would hope there won't be if the isolation process goes well, they're just going to have to get used to living in each other's pockets and playing the game of cricket without warm-ups, without warm-up games against other teams, and without crowds. And for some who thrive on the atmosphere and the environment of a crowd, and a crowd that's back in and getting behind them, they might find this quite tough.
Luckily, in the age of social media, Shaun, they will get some feel of, the attention that the world is going to turn on this, since this is going to probably be some of the only cricket on offer. And the fact that we didn't have warm-up games is probably also going to raise the level of interest, because we really don't know what to expect. What do you expect?
Yeah, we don't know who's in form. We don't know who's going to be bowling well. I would actually think, if I was the West Indies management, I would say, I've got 25 guys there. Let's split them up into 2 teams, and let's try and have an actual legitimate first-class game. Try and get a venue where it's just you 2 guys playing against each other. Get it down in the first-class records, just to try and create that intensity. I'm sure there'll be plenty of middle practices, but the intensity is what you want to create. And they will be followed. England always gets some fantastic crowds for Test cricket, so it will be followed on social media, on the TV. And maybe by the time the games start, they'll have some sound effects in the background. I remember we went down to New Zealand. It was one of the first places to do the sound effects in the background. And if someone dropped a catch, he would go, "Doo!" Bart Simpson kind of thing would be played in, and all different songs would be played in. So maybe they'll try and create some atmosphere that way, but it's going to be challenging for them. But I think the key is for those West Indians to really try and do everything they possibly can. I'm sure from an English perspective, there's enough guys, and they got 50-odd in the squad, so they can definitely put a first-class game together between the 2 bunch of teams. But the West Indies will be the challenge, and I think we'll be very interested to see how the game goes.
It's going to be difficult, and difficult for reasons that they're not used to and reasons that they probably haven't encountered before. But I think the team should be all about embracing the challenge. If you want to go to England and face England, normally you would face them in a pretty tough environment, in front of a packed house at Lord's, a packed house maybe at Trent Bridge, or wherever you play, maybe somewhere up in Yorkshire. And this time you can just take them on with no distractions. You've just got a very quiet environment, but like the old village green, and nobody watching. So I think you should embrace it as an overseas side. It's probably the best opportunity that you've got to tip England over in their home conditions. They don't have the crowd on their side. So if I'm in the West Indies camp, I would be saying exactly that. Guys, it's a great opportunity. Those guys that have opted out, yep, we understand, we know why, but it's given other guys an opportunity. So make the most of it, enjoy it. And, there will be more eyeballs, I think, on this test match than there will be for another test match for quite a long time. This will be up there, I would imagine, with an Ashes type test match for viewing, an India-Australia test match for viewing numbers.
Certainly. And I think that's what's so exciting about this prospect is you'll see players who thrive on that kind of pressure rise to the occasion defiantly, and that's so exciting to see. Now, in our Hall of Fame this week, in this feature, we are looking at a player who would probably have had that kind of energy coming into a match such as this. We are, this week, taking a moment to celebrate the great contribution made by Sir Curtly Ambrose. Of course, the pride of Antigua, inducted in the ICC Hall of Fame in 2011. And the stats behind this guy's name, absolutely phenomenal reading. One of the greatest fast bowlers of all time, 405 test wickets, an average of 20.99, topped the ICC player rankings for much of his career. And I think that, one of those moments that he really stood up and people took notice of him, the highlights that you always watch back, is that Australia game in 93. He bowled one of the greatest bowling spells of all time, 7 wickets, conceding a single run. That is insane. And people say that he particularly stood up and showed his mettle when the chips seemed to be down, when things were really tough. What is it that made him so absolutely devastating, in your opinion, Shaun Pollock?
It was accuracy. I mean, he was blessed to be very tall, Amby. He came from a real high height, and he was very accurate. He didn't give much away. He wasn't one of those West Indians who charged and bowled that many bounces. He would let you know that he had the short pitch delivery. But he was just a brilliant performer, whether it was Test cricket or one-day cricket. He was a guy who kept running in. His action looked so rhythmical. It looked like he wasn't executing or putting out too much effort in order to get the ball down at a fair rate of knots. And what a character he was too, with the wristbands on and the facial features, the celebrations when he got the wickets. And we've seen him in his band as well in Antigua. He plays some good music, does Amby. And he was a real character of the game and one we enjoyed watching. Didn't really enjoy playing against him all that often from a batting perspective. But he was brilliant to watch from the outside.
Let's talk about his temperament as a bowler. He was on a podcast recently during this lockdown period. We talked about the fact that he wanted the ball to do the talking, wasn't into sledging, but he really seemed to get better under massive pressure. Simon Doull, tell me about the kind of temperament that he had.
How I would describe Amby would be, I won't say white line fever, but very close to it. Because you see him off the park, he's the nicest guy. He's got the biggest, widest smile of any cricketer in the world, and he's just such a lovely bloke. But you walk on that cricket field, and he was just a frightening prospect. Yes, he let the ball do the talking, didn't say too much. Might have had a word or two to Dean Jones that day in Australia when Dean Jones asked him to asked the umpire to get him to remove the white armbands. That wasn't the best move, and I think Dean Jones still makes a bit of money out of his after dinner speaking with that story. But the temperament, the ability, was almost a bit like Glenn McGrath, quite metronomical as far as his line and his length was concerned. As Shaun said, he was quick enough to let you know that he had a very, very good bouncer. And just did enough with it. And when you think about Curtly Ambrose, you think about one thing, and that's that little wiggle at the top, right when the ball was at the highest point above his head, just before delivery. It was just a little wiggle, and he just let you know it was coming at you. And it was horrible man to face, but one of the loveliest guys off the park, and always laughing and smiling.
Tell us the Ambrose story. We won't get anywhere else, Shaun Pollock. Come on.
Curtly Ambrose story. I don't know. I think Amby, I do remember a scary incident with him and Steve Waugh when he was on his case. I think it was in the West Indies. He was bowling some bumpers, and they came face to face. But I think the only story I can remember about Amby that might add a bit of humour is I can remember them went to South Africa for the first time, and they went into the hotel in Durban. They had to go and get different beds because they needed extra length beds, and they weren't fitting into the ones that were in the rooms already, so they had to go and purchase some extra length beds, I think, for Welsh and Ambrose, to make sure they could have a comfortable night's sleep.
I would have put them in the smallest cot in the world and made them feel so bad so they couldn't wake up and bowl the next day.
Do your best to ensure a bit of a crook in the back there for the absolutely phenomenal talent that was Sir Curtly Ambrose. In our Hall of Fame feature, a man with such phenomenal stats to his name. Speaking of stats, who will end up with more test wickets for each of the following pairs? That is what we are zooming in on when it comes to stats. James Anderson and Stuart Broad, of course, the names at the top of this graph with a phenomenal total of test wickets, over 1,000 between the two of them. Then we have Nathan Lyon and Ravi Ashwin. They, of course, are representing the spinners there. And then the Kiwi contingent, Tim Southee and Trent Boult. Now, we've selected these 6 of the 7 most prolific bowlers currently playing Test cricket. Simon, decent averages and numbers between the Kiwis. What do you think they need to do to get and beat, those the standards set so far by Mrs. Anderson and Broad?
we don't play anywhere near as much cricket. I think you'll see that from Jimmy Anderson's 150 something Test matches, is it? Trent Boult, Tim Southee, they'll never get to those type of numbers. I think when you're looking at who's going to end up with the most between the two Kiwis, you would say Trent Boult, just for, I think, longevity. Tim Southee made his debut at a young age. He's played a lot of white ball cricket along with the red ball cricket, and I think his body is just slowly starting to go downhill a little bit. He works extremely hard on it, but I think the longevity factor will see Trent Boult go past Southee eventually. Don't think anyone's ever going to get near Sir Richard Hadley's record, but Trent Boult's probably going to end up the closest to Daniel Vettori in second place. I don't think he's going to get past either Daniel Vettori or Sir Richard Hadley. So to me, it's Boult ahead of Southee as far as the amount at the end of their careers in those two. But you throw Neil Wagner into that mix, and that's what's been the success around New Zealand's seam attack in the last 3, 4, 5 years. Anderson should get to 600 this summer, I would imagine. He'll be looking to get to 600 against the West Indies in these Test matches. He's 584, so 16 short of getting to that 600 mark. He'll reach that mark. I'm kind of in the, when I look at those two, I'm in the Anderson will always remain ahead of Broad category, because for the same reasons of Boult and Southee, I think Stuart Broad's body will give up on him in the next couple of years. Although he's younger, I'm not sure he will get through to 37, 38 like Jimmy Anderson's looking to do. So that would be the way I'd go on the Anderson Broad front. And I'd go with Lyon, because I think he's just going to play more Test matches than Ashwin will eventually. And although they don't get the turning conditions in Australia that perhaps Ashwin can encounter in India, I think the competition for Ravi Ashwin is so much greater now, and Nathan Lyon doesn't have any competition. And if Aussie play a Test, he will play.
Shaun, would you select Ashwin more often, or do you think it's fair?
I think we had this discussion when we were commentating on the Test series over there. I mean, his facts and figures are pretty impressive. When you just look at that as the benchmark, you do think maybe he should play more games. But, there is a balance to the side. You've got to work out whether they will play a part in the match. And India might fancy Jadeja if there's more right-handers in a particular team. So it's a nice situation for them to be in. But, his numbers that he has does say to you that you would almost think if he was anywhere else in the world, he would be one of the first names on a team sheet. So he's done brilliantly, and I look forward to seeing how he goes going forward. But one thing's for sure, when they get back to India, he's never short of being selected there.
Okay, well, let us know what you think. Who will end up with more Test wickets of the 6 bowlers we are discussing here? Coming up next on Cricket Inside Out, something we started doing recently, asking all of our guests for their favourite moments behind the mic. Shaun Pollock, have you got a favourite moment on the mic that you'd like to tell us more about? Take us into the commentary room, behind that lip mic, into your brain. What's that moment that stands out?
Yeah, it's a bit challenging, I suppose. I mean, as Dooley would say, sometimes it can be like a job because things can be slow. But there are other times where it's just thoroughly entertaining and you actually can't wait to get on because of what's unfolding before you. Some performances by Dale Steyn, his bowling, Hashim Amla getting 300, even milestones when people retire and play their last game for their country. I mean, all those times are nice to be on because you can compliment them and say nice things about them. But if I had to pick one, I think it would be the A.B. de Villiers 100 at the Wanderers, the fastest 100 when he got 140 odd, nearly got 150. I'd just come on and it was 40 overs, I think, or 42 overs that I got onto the mark and he started to cut loose. And that was just brilliant to try and think of the words you could possibly say. And I mean, we're standing up, we're just caught in the action. You don't even think about commentating. You're just caught up in what's going on. And a rare feat. I don't think that'll happen again. I think that record will stand for a long period of time. And it was just an exhibition in his pink outfit at the Wanderers in front of a full crowd. I think that was my most enjoyable moment. We've had a few other ones where not so enjoyable. And Dooley can maybe touch on it. That's the semi-final in New Zealand. One of the ones that wasn't so enjoyable to be on the air when it unfolded.
Simon, you have a favourite moment?
Yeah, I'm terrible with remembering times that I've been on the microphone. I think you get engrossed in the game, and I was thinking about it this afternoon, and I couldn't remember whether I was on the microphone or whether I was off, and just watching and enjoying the occasion in some of the games that I've done and enjoyed the most. But the one time when I had the microphone in hand and I was I basically could sort of had to pinch myself a little bit was when I was asked to do the toss at the 2015 World Cup final, and the MCG. It was New Zealand's first ever ICC World Cup final. So to me, that was also a special moment. Brendan McCullum, I think he was on my left, and Michael Clark was on my right. And it was that World Cup where we'd decided that you would walk out with the captains prior to the toss and just ask a couple of questions quickly, left and right, and then get to the middle and produce the coin, and the match referee would be there, do the toss. So I'm walking out to the middle of the Melbourne cricket ground, a ground where I never got to play at, but I was fortunate enough to commentate it and to walk across that turf out to the middle with two guys who are highly respected in their fields and their countries to a World Cup final, and I'm sort of pinching myself a little bit, saying, I get to do this, and this is something that people call, or they say, this is your job. It just doesn't quite feel like that. So that was amazing, walking out to the middle of the MCG, conducting the toss, New Zealand's first ever ICC World Cup 50 over final. The crowd, there was Kiwis everywhere in that crowd. They'd flown over. I think I must have had in excess of 150, 200 requests for tickets, and I didn't have any to give away at all, so that doesn't help. But just that whole moment, that whole situation of being able to walk out there, conduct the toss, and just be in the moment of the start, and then Mitchell Stark kind of got in the way, and then it all just sort of like a balloon, you just poked the balloon and it all deflated for New Zealand, and that was it. It was like, we felt like South Africa.
Ouch.
I've got one that was really, really good, and this is exceptional talent. He was doing it, I think, a toss of one of the RPL games, and one of the captains jumped the gun and just flicked the coin before he had given him permission to. And out of the corner of his eye, he just put his arm out and grabbed the coin and said, "No, not yet," and gave it back to him. So I thought that was brilliant.
Verinder Sehwag, I can tell you it was. It was, Verinder Sehwag. We were doing a game, whether it was in Delhi or something, I'm not sure. But in the IPL, you welcome everybody. Welcome to match number 48 of the IPL, blah, blah, blah. And as I was saying that, Veru just flicked the coin. And I'm just carrying on with my conversation. I put my hand out, caught the coin, brought it back. I said, "You can toss in a minute, Veru." And then I carried on my little bit, and I turned around. I said, "Right, you can toss now." And away we went.
Now that is a replay. That is a moment that deserves a replay, if ever there was one. Thank you so much for sharing that, guys. Favorite moments on the mic from our guests on Cricket Inside Out this week. Now we turn our attention to you, since you have been weighing in with your questions, and we have loved seeing what you have to say. On Twitter, Tanmo Virat says, "Why are wrist spinners not used as much in Test cricket as finger spinners? Lyon, Ashwin and Moeen dominate in that department." Shaun, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think the problem is they all have to try and live up to the standards set by Shane Warne. It's not an easy art. If you can get someone who does it brilliantly, they can have a massive impact on the game, because especially on South African surfaces and Australian surfaces, for example, the wrist spinner gets that extra revs and extra bounce, so they can be more effective. I think the art of finger spinning has come back with the advent of the DRS and the ability to get LBWs and those things, and guys just used to get outside the line and just pad it away, whereas these days they can't. So I think that's why there's been an increase. But it is a serious art to be able to bowl some leg spin, and I think it's just difficult to get right at the top level.
Rawat and Nitin 7 asks, "My question to Simon, sir, who is the best cricketing brain you have come across?"
Oh, goodness me. Best cricketing brain I've come across. Wow. If I can go back to my early days, I suppose Martin Crowe was, I thought, had a great insight and a great knowledge and a great love for the game. Cricketing brain, he was brilliant. I thought the processes that he went through, captaining New Zealand through that '92 World Cup, the innovation that he showed, phenomenal. So to me, he is right up there as far as I'm concerned. Of more recent times, I've found probably someone like Ricky Ponting. I've been very, very impressed with Ricky's ability. Not only was he an absolute great of the game with the bat in hand, but I think his ability to turn to coaching and to listen to his analysis and commentary, I've been very, very impressed with that. So I think Ricky's a very knowledgeable man when it comes to cricket. I think his pedigree speaks for itself, but his cricketing brain, when I listen to him in the commentary box, he's one of those guys that I love his insights and just the different thoughts around what he brings to it.
Shaun, have you got a cricketing brain that you've come across in the course of your work? You are well-travelled and experienced in cricket. Someone you really rate?
Oh, there's so many good ones, especially in the commentary box. The cricketing brains are unbelievable. But if I had to pick one, particularly at my time, or two, in fact, at the time of my career, Malcolm Marshall, his understanding of conditions and what was required. He had a brilliant cricket brain, a working batsman out. So from that side. And then the late Bob Woolmer. He was a passionate cricketer in many ways before his time with some of the thinking that he used to put in place. So I would go those two.
On Facebook, Salman Kabir Polash asks, Shaun Pollock is my favourite cricketer. There's a compliment for you, Shaun. My question for him is, outside of yourself and Alan Donald, which bowling pair is the most dangerous in world cricket?
Okay, well, all time, I think as a pair, you'd probably go Wasim and Waka. Their skills, didn't matter what the surface was like, they didn't need particular conditions to be successful. They could do it on any kind of surface, so we'll go for those two. Currently, not so long ago I would have said Steyn and Philander, but I suppose I can't go down that route now, can I? Who am I thinking? I suppose if you have them operating at their best at any particular time, Gordon Anderson would be up there. But if I had to pick two, they're both bowling as well as they could, I'd go Cummins one end, Stark the other.
On YouTube, Goran Matad asks, my question is for Simon Doull. How does he look at the Australia versus India series that will happen later this year? What would be his expectations of Rohit Sharma?
I think, and I've long said that Rohit's probably the first picked in any one-day international side, World 11, Indian 11. His test match credentials are still, in overseas conditions, are still yet to be, I think, justified fully. I know they have faith. I know Australia should suit him. The slightly bouncier conditions, they should suit him quite nicely. But he's going to have to come to terms with overseas conditions and prove himself in that area before he becomes a genuine test match player. So it would be a series for me that would, I won't say define him, because he's defined as a cricketer already, but not as a test match player. And so that's something that if he came through an Australian series, he might play test cricket for another 2 or 3 years after that, if he came through it with good numbers. But it's just something that has avoided him or eluded him a little bit over his career. He's been in and out of that Indian side. They're showing faith in him again. It will not be easy, and he needs to start well. If he can start well in Australia, give himself some confidence, he may have a great tour.
DK Yadav is asking, will Stephen Smith be able to become Australia's team captain again in all formats?
No, and no. I can't see it. I just cannot see them going back down that road. I don't know who would take it on if they were to go away from Tim Payne in the test matches. I don't know who would take it on there. I think Aaron Finch does a fine job in the white ball arena as far as the one days are concerned. So I do not see them going back down the Steve Smith track at all.
Yeah, I think they might consider doing it for test matches. I think down the line, if he's going to play for quite so many years, I don't think in the one-day format. But I know they say he's open to doing it, but you never know the politics behind the scenes. And so that's the difficult thing to work out from that perspective. But I think just maybe they might surprise us with him after Tim Payne decides to step down or has had enough. You might see him in the Test arena.
Speaking of Test captaincies, the next question is, who is the best current Test captain out there in international cricket?
You know what? I'm very, very hard pressed to find who the best current Test match captain is. I think there's guys have their strengths. There's guys have their weaknesses. I think Kane Williamson can be a very good captain at times. I'd put Williamson, Root, and Kohli in the same category. I think at times they can be quite good, but I think they all let the game drift at times, and are not proactive enough on some occasions. Very quick, all three of them, very quick to set defensive fields, particularly to spinners. Guys on the boundary in the first few overs of spin. So I'm not a big fan of seeing that straight away. I find it very, very difficult to pick one player out who is a really good captain. See, I think Tim Payne is a good captain. Is he the best player in Australia to keep wickets and to bat in that number 7 spot? Probably not. But I think he's captains that side very well, and he's done what Australia needed him to do. So I haven't answered the question in one because I can't find one. I think they all have their faults.
Shaun Pollock, former captain, come on, give us your pick. You've now had lots of time to think about this.
Yeah, I have. And we don't know who the current South African captain is, but he is the best captain.
On to our debate today. We have a really meaty topic. I can't wait to see what you guys do with this one. Coaches or captains, who should be more influential? Simon Doull, are you taking the coach's corner? Is that correct?
It is correct.
Give us your argument on this topic.
Well, players of the modern era, and so I'm taking Shaun and myself out of this, have become so reliant on everything outside, all the outside influence, whether it be a computer, whether it be technology, whether it be the flickers from the coaches, the bowling coach, the batting coach, the fielding coaches. They have become so reliant that they've forgotten how to self-coach and how to self-teach. And they've forgotten the art of actually looking within and saying, well, I need to do this. This is how I'm feeling. This is what's going wrong. I need to do this to fix myself. And I've got to sort myself out to some extent. First thing they do when they get out, you see them, they rush off the field, they leave their pads on, they go straight to the computer. Oh, what did I do wrong there? The game is not played on a computer, but the coaches are there to help them. So because the players have become so reliant on coaches, the coach has become so much more important. Now he has another coach beside him and two more coaches, one to just do the flicking, one to do the fielding drills, one to do the bowling, one to do the batting. So the coach has become such a heavily involved part of all cricket, of all teams. You see teams go away on tour now. There is 14 to 15 players and 14 to 15 management. So coaches, management have become more important than the players in being able to provide everything they possibly can for that player to get on the park and to perform at their best.
Wow. Cricket's one of the few major sports where coaches tend to sit on the sidelines and the captains run the show. Is the coach just a spectator in the heat of the battle, or does Simon perhaps have a point?
No, the coach is there to facilitate and add to the product. The captain has to be in charge. It's not like soccer where it's 2 45 minutes and you've got a half time where you can have a chitter chatter and the action's so fast paced. There's plenty of strategy, thinking, trying to get a feel for what's going on, implementing little changes. You've got time to make alterations. You've got to influence the game as the captain. So it has to be him who stays in control. And a prime example is Owen Morgan. Owen Morgan came in, he had a vision of what his team should be doing, how they should be playing. They put him in charge, they gave him the reins, he took over, took his team to the World Cup final and won the World Cup. The moral of the story is that the captain needs to be in charge because he's the one who can influence things at all stages. Coaches, please play your part, be a facilitator, help out as much as you can. They leave the reins to the captain. He's the man who needs to do the job.
I'm glad that the English team had nothing to do with the coaching, did they? No, the coaches might as well not have even been there. I think you should let the coaches of the England team know that they had nothing to do with them winning the World Cup at all. Nothing to do with it.
There you have it, Simon and Shaun Pollock weighing in on this debate topic. We'd love to hear from you. Who do you think made a better case? And have you perhaps got an angle on this argument that we hadn't even considered yet? Make sure that you weigh in on social media. You keep sending us your questions and input for next week's show. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, Shaun, for joining us. And Simon, enjoy your live sport this weekend.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, Julie.
Thank you. Cheers.